As you may be able to tell, I am feeling festive and I would like to draw something Christmassy. Now I'm wanting to draw something this week with colour pencils and I'm wanting it to be a reasonably fast drawing. So I'm going to draw this holly. Although it may look complicated, it's actually pretty quick and I think looks really cool. This is something that's particularly nice to draw because there isn't really any texture in it. Any texture that may appear to be there is really just created from the outlines of the leaves. Now before we start drawing, I do have a full in-depth tutorial of these holly leaves on my Patreon. I split the whole drawing down into sections and go through each section step by step. I also include sketch outlines of the holly leaves, the reference photo and details of all of the colours that I'll be using. And I have not only these holly leaves but a number of other Christmas drawings as well, if you really want to go for it on the Christmas front, as well as general other drawings available too. Check out the link in the description. Alright, so I want to start drawing these holly leaves and as usual I'm going to start by putting down some base layers. To do this I want to think about the very lightest colour that I want to add on the leaves. Now for this drawing I am working from a reference photo, so I can look at that reference photo and look for the lightest colour on any part of the leaves. So I would say that on these particular leaves, although you would think the lightest colour would be green, it's actually more of a cool grey, a very light cool grey, which is from some of the reflections on the leaves. And all I want to do is add a very light layer of this colour all over the leaves. I just want to get something down on the leaves that I can then work off of and begin to build upon. Now, as I say, I want to be working very lightly here, and the main thing I can do to help myself press as lightly as possible with the pencil is to hold it a little bit further back. You'll notice that I'm not holding it right by the tip. If I hold it further back on the pencil, then it makes it impossible for me to press too hard. I also want to make sure that I can get this colour down as smoothly as possible. The leaves are very smooth, so I want to be working in some kind of circular motions, kind of oval shapes, which again is just going to get that colour down in a really smooth, even way. And this is all I need to do to start with. Now once I've gone over all of the leaves and put down this first base layer, I also want to be thinking about any other areas of the holly leaves, so I'm particularly looking at the berries. And I do also want to put a light grey here as well, but this is going to be more like a warmer grey. And I'll do this in exactly the same way, working in these circular motions. So from here I want to start working with these lighter colours and I'm going to very gradually move my way towards the darker colours. So I once again can look at my reference photo, see that the next darkest colour within the reference is this kind of lime green colour. And I can put this colour everywhere, all over the leaves, where the leaves are either this colour or darker. So you'll notice that I'm leaving various patches. That's because there are these reflections on the leaves. And that eventually I will want to be more of a grey colour. But beyond that, I'm really just doing exactly the same as I did with the grey pencil. So still holding the pencil further back, pressing really lightly and working in these circular motions to make this as smooth as I can. And it all looks a little bit peculiar at this point, but that's fine. It all comes together once we build up all of the different layers of the different colours. So once I've done this lighter green, I can move on to a darker green. I'm still gradually working my way towards these darker colours. And once again, I want to put this darker green everywhere that is this kind of green or darker. So once again, avoiding those patches of light. And I also want to avoid the kind of central vein on the leaves. They are much more generally of the lighter green. Now, one of the main things that I'm focusing on whilst I'm using this pencil is getting a really good crisp outline to the leaves. I would say one of the main things about holly leaves when you think of them is their spiky edges. So I want to make sure that I get those marked in a really nice crisp way. This is all made 10 times easier if I have a nice and sharp pencil. It means I can be really accurate about where the pencil is going and make sure that these leaves do have a very crisp edge. And you can see quite quickly where I'm adding this colour, it is beginning to look like holly leaves. It hasn't really got any sort of contrast and it's not looking super realistic, but it does, at least you can tell it's holly leaves. Now I do want to carry on working my way down through the colours. Before I do that, I'm just noticing that I haven't got any sort of red on the berries yet. So I'm looking for the lightest red colour within these berries. and I'm putting it all over the berries except for each berry has a kind of light patch. So I just want to avoid that light patch, but again put this nice smooth even layer on the rest of the berries. And then from here I'm going to keep working my way through the colours. So here I'm noticing that each of the leaves has a kind of gold patch on it. On various parts of the reflections on the leaves, there's clearly something gold nearby, because it does have various glints of this gold. Now I don't want to actually use a gold pencil, so I can start off by marking out where these gold areas will be with a light brown, and then I can put a reasonably bright yellow over the top of that, and that creates this kind of gold look. Can't stress enough though that I'm still not pressing hard throughout all of this. Any pressing hard that I will want to do will need to happen right at the end. So from here, I'm still working my way through the colours and I'm moving on to a slightly darker grey now. Again, a darker grey created from, I think, a lot of the reflections on the leaves. It's all made a lot easier when you're drawing from a reference photo. It will end up looking more realistic because you wouldn't necessarily think that there is gold and all of these different greys in the leaves. You would think it's mostly a series of greens and maybe browns. So do you think drawing from a reference photo ends up making the items you're drawing look a lot more realistic? Now at this point I would say I'm particularly noticing that I need to add a darker green, but I don't actually have a darker green than the green I used a little bit earlier on. So what I want to do is mark in all of these very dark green areas with a very dark brown instead. Once again, working around these same patches of light. And then I'll be able to go over this dark brown with the green to make it appear to be a dark green. So it doesn't matter that we don't have a green as dark as the green that's in the reference photo. Now, even after I've gone over all of the holly leaves with this very dark brown, I'm still noticing that there are some areas that I think should be a little bit darker. So I can mark these in with the black pencil. I don't generally like using too much black on my drawings. I think that it can look a bit harsh. So I am using it quite sparingly, only on the absolute darkest patches of the leaves. And then I will make sure that I go over the black with the green pencil to make it more like a dark green again. I do find that if you don't do this, it just looks a little bit harsh. But now we've worked from the very lightest colours to the darkest colours. The leaves are looking not the right colour necessarily, but they do look like they have the right amount of contrast, which in my opinion is the most important part of colour pencil drawing. So from here I can move on to a slightly darker red pencil and really start brightening up the berries. I've basically made myself a nice template with some of the previous colours, and it means that thankfully now it's pretty clear to see where this needs to go. Now we would say at this point I move on from a very light pressure to a medium pressure, mostly because I can now be pretty confident that I know where this red needs to go. So once I'm happy with the berries, I can again move on to the leaves. And as I mentioned, I want to make these leaves look far more green. So I can go back to that kind of mid-tone green I used a lot earlier on. And again, using a medium to firm pressure, go over all of the brown sections to really brighten them up. Now I am still using the circular motions, even though I'm using more like a medium pressure, because I do want this to look as smooth as I can. And you can see it's just changing the brown color into more like a dark green. And I can go over all of the leaves with this green, making sure that if I'm sort of getting towards the edge of a dark section, I do feather out the green. I don't want to have any abrupt edges. And so once I've gone over all of the leaves, I then want to carry on working through those same colours that I used earlier. So adding in a bit more of the darker grey to really brighten up some of the more silvery patches of the leaves. And I can use the light grey to blend some of the lightest areas. And that really just helps the leaves to come together, look much smoother. It generally helps these light patches, I think, look more like light patches rather than just random spots. And then the final thing to do is to very lightly add in a shadow. All right, and that is it. Now don't forget that you can see the full drawing available on my Patreon. And if you'd like to see a different Christmas drawing, check out this video here. Happy drawing, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.